Hello, today I want to talk about what I consider quite a fun little topic, and that is how to incorporate eating more organic slash spray-free food into your life and into your family's life. Obviously, there's been a continuous growth and interest in food sovereignty. Again, that will depend on the society in which you live in and obviously the people that you're interacting with. So you may be experiencing the polarity of that, and that's okay. However, the society in which I reside in and the people in which I engage with, there has been a continual growth within that area, which is great. Now, so I'm just going to go through a list of things. Maybe the things you have thought of, maybe the things you didn't think of until this moment. Again, I understand that for most people within urban environments, it's not always that easy to only eat organic food. There's a lot of obviously financial but societal pressure to do lots of things that don't always align with eating organic food. Plus, if you are residing in a property that has very limited space for growing food, that can also inhibit some things as well. Right, so first one, check out your local market. Now, depending on where you reside and the type of demographics that might be in your area, you may find that a lot of your local marketeers, people that sell at their markets, are selling spray-free or organic produce, or you might just find there's only one. Yeah. So where I live, there's actually a lot of organic stores, and there is a local market that's on every Saturday. Now, when I first moved here, I'd say about more than 4 years ago, there was quite a few market stall holders that were spray-free and organic, and now there's only about 2. So that as an option is interesting because obviously the options have diminished, yet I live in an area in which there's at least 5 stores, not including mainstream supermarkets, where I can get either all organic food or all spray-free food, or a mixture or majority of that. So, interesting, but yes, talk to the people at the market stalls. There is also a beautiful market about 15-minute drive north of where I am on a Sunday. Only takes 15 minutes because it's a Sunday, and they only sell organic produce with all their market stall holders, which is amazing. So if you're not finding many options at your general local market, have a look to see if there's an organic market. Maybe you might have to drive a little bit further, I'm not sure, and see if you can check out that as well. Obviously, one of the major things that most people will tell you is to learn how to grow your own food and to actually action that as well. Now, there's a whole polarity in that, right? So you could start off by just having a simple little planter box and just grow some herbs, in your kitchen windowsill, all the way up to having a full functioning food forest, and there's anything in between. So starting with what you know that you can work with, whether that be with your time, the information you have access to, and your financial viability. Another one is community gardens. Now, often most community gardens won't go ahead and get certified to be organic. It's really expensive. Community gardens are often run as non-profit organizations, not always, but often that way. Plus, they often might welcome in compost from other people, and they might be giving compost that's not necessarily organic. So depending on the community garden, it might sit within a sort of spray-free category. So at least again, you're still getting some produce in that hasn't had as much chemicals sprayed onto it, that are not very conducive to the human and the environment. So, and obviously to get involved with that, I highly recommend, if you can, not just take, but also be able to give some of your time and assist in any way that you can, whether it be an irregular or regular basis with their community garden. It just really helps the reciprocity in that. And if you don't have time, there is some donations. I'm sure they'd be very happy to receive some money for that too, or other goods that you can donate, whether it be wood to help them with creating planter, raised beds and things like that. Another thing you can check out, often people talk about this thing called Dirty Dozen. No, it's not as sexual as it sounds. Dirty Dozen is just looking at the fruits and vegetables that tend to have the most chemicals sprayed onto them that are quite toxic, and the Dirty Dozen being maybe the top 12 that have the most of those, and just trying to either avoid buying them or only buying them spray-free and organic if you can do so. Again, another way is eating lower on the food chain, if I can put it that way. So higher up the food chain that you eat, especially if it is not organic, then the toxicity that could be in that food can be a lot higher. Whereas if you tend to eat more plant-based foods, there won't be, not always, but there will be less likely to be as toxic chemicals within the food. Now, another one is trading. So if you're growing some food and someone else is growing food, you can trade. It doesn't also have to be a food trade to receive the food. Maybe there's other services that you provide that you could give in exchange for organic or non-spray food. Another one is you could start a food co-op. You could join one that exists, or you could create one yourself. Again, that allows people to buy food as a group in bulk, and you can get better prices. And there's a bit of a market out there for food that not necessarily is conventional, but it hasn't paid and gone through the certification process of becoming organic. A lot of smaller producers, food producers, can't afford to go through the whole organic certification. So there's this like middle market thing where you can get some really good prices on food that, like I said, it's not organic, but it's not necessarily conventional. And buying it in bulk with friends is a great way to bring the cost down for you to do that. Another way that you can incorporate eating more organic and spray-free food is actually spending less money and resources on things that no longer serve you. So I don't know, maybe you spend $20, $30 or something on coffees out. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I know it's very much an activity that a lot of people like to partake in. This sort of modern society. And so with that, maybe you could consider making your own coffee at home. Maybe you could even consider getting organic coffee beans or growing your own coffee beans, depending on which climate you're in. And then you can use that money to, again, buy organic coffee beans, or put that money towards food that is organic and spray-free, when you might normally have bought a conventional version of that. Another one is learning how to make your food more from what I might call scratch. So an example would be, you could buy organic bread, or you could learn how to make your own organic bread. And that is usually cheaper than having to pay someone to have made it. You could go a step further, and you could even grow your own grains and seeds or whatever to make your own bread. You could go through the whole processing of those into a flour and then make it into a bread. So that's another step further. But that's just an example of saving money when it comes to that, if you've got some more time. Plus, there can be a bit of a joy that can be experienced through making your own food. Not for everyone. And there's also there's more of an interesting energetic exchange when you're making something from scratch. There's especially if you're in a really loving place when you're making it, like you're putting even more love into it. And I'm not saying that if you bake organic bread for a business and sell it, that you're not putting love into your food. I'm not saying that, but I'm just, from a consumer point of view, like it can be really helpful to learn how to make these things yourself, especially if for some reason there's a shortage on a food that you particularly like, but you can find an alternative way or an alternative to that. Right, obviously a big one is to eat seasonally, depending on where you live. It's going to really depend on what you can eat. It is a little bit unfortunate because the way in which we live now, we don't tend to have a lot of variety of foods nearby, especially if you live in urban areas. So obviously a lot of biodiversity has been destroyed within last so many hundreds of years. But again, that's where you can obviously also learn about the native plants and maybe edible weeds and things like that as well. So that actually ties into another one I had down, which is learning about the original and native plants and edible plants as well, and they will be growing seasonally. That ties in with that. If you can speak with elders, if you can speak with wild food crafters, maybe join some courses or buy books, plant identification books, spend time with people that really have that, especially plant wisdoms, what to look for when you're looking. Again, it's not like a top one. It's not one I want to promote all the time, but you may also find that some supermarkets now are actually starting to sell organic food. So make use of that when you can, if you can, even, especially if it's the only option available to you today or this week. Or you're just starting out on your journey. I do buy things from the supermarket myself personally, and I'll always go to the organic section first. I'll only actually ever buy organic produce from the supermarket. I won't ever buy conventional produce from the supermarket. That's just me personally. That's just where I'm at the moment. I have the financial viability to place those kind of guidelines along myself and be able to stick within. It's not the only place I get my produce, but if I go into a supermarket and I need to purchase produce, I'll always only go to the organic section for that and only purchase from that area. Now, another thing is, obviously, you can buy frozen goods, but you can also, if you have a surplus of certain foods, you can help with the preservation of that, because buying things in bulk and when it's in season, it's great. It can make things a little bit cheaper, but it could be too much for you to consume within a short period of time before it starts to go off. So, thinking about not only buying frozen food, but it's obviously not always best to buy frozen food. I do occasionally buy frozen berries. I am a bit of a sucker for that. I do like frozen berries in my smoothie sometimes. But again, you can freeze food too. So if you get an excess of fresh produce, there's certain produce that you can freeze. You can also get into things like pickling, drying, canning, all of that sort of stuff. Think about what your grandparents may have done, or depending on the age that you're watching, that's great grandparents, or your parents. There could be multiple generations of people watching this, and so just think about how did they preserve their food. And I know my grandmother always, and she's still here, she'd always have all these shelves of like beetroot, like I'm talking like huge amounts of beetroot. I mean, maybe as a child you might over exaggerate on what you were seeing, but I swear there'd be like 10 shelves of like 10 jars of beetroot on each shelf. And I'm not talking like small jars, I'm talking like big canning jars, so things like that. People might poo-poo it or whatever and say, oh, you're prepper or you're doomsday, whatever. But there's nothing wrong with it. You can, if you wanted to also make some money and not necessarily eat it all yourself, you could sell or trade or gift that to friends and family. And, it's not necessarily like you're hoarding. It's just like, hey, I've bought too many apples, or my apple tree's got an excess amount of apples. Like, what can I do with them? And I've got a good friend in New Zealand, because it's a colder climate. She's able to actually preserve her apples in a particular way in her house without using a fridge for up to 9 months, because she knows what she's doing. And I know she uses cardboard boxes and newspaper and things like that. And these are just things that she has around. It's not like she goes out and buys boxes or buys newspaper just for that to happen. So yeah, that's one way. Another way is eating more at home, maybe having social gatherings around potlucks instead of eating out. I tend to eat at home all the time, and when I'm in the office, I'm always taking in my lunch. I'm a little picky on what I eat. I guess there's certain foods that I just won't eat, and so it's just much easier for me to always make my own food. Plus, it's very expensive and not even really available these days, actually, to find organic, like cafes and restaurants. There just doesn't seem to be a lot of them around at the moment. As to why, I'm not going to question. It's not the purpose of this vlog. But yes, eating at home and potlucks, bringing your lunch, if you're not going to be at home, all of that, taking it with you. Another way is, make use of things like sales, coupons, buying in bulk. There was a time period here where I didn't have any income coming in, so I did do a lot of dumpster diving. Again, I'm not going to talk about whether you should or should not do that activity. I don't know whether it's legal or illegal where you are. If you get in trouble, I will not be held responsible for that. But yes, dumpster diving is another way. If you can have access to organic food, dumpster dives, well, organic food stores that have dumpsters that you can access, or just general places that might have organic food in their dumpster. Another tip is just a little more planning sometimes, just a little more preparation. That can also help. Again, it kind of ties in when I was saying, like, when I'm in the office, I always bring my own lunch. Yes, it takes a little bit more planning. It's not like, oh, I'm feeling like I'm going to have my lunch now. I'm just going to go, order whatever I want. It's like, no, I've already, before I left to come here, I've already packed something and it's here. And the last one, it's up to you actually. If you've got any tips, you can leave them in the comment section down below. I welcome that. This is not an exhaustive list, although I do feel it's rather comprehensive. We're heading into like nearly 19 minutes now.